My name is Emily Rhodes. I'm 35, a public school librarian in Asheville, and I thought losing my mom would be the hardest part. But then my husband filed for divorce the moment he realized I couldn't give him a penny of her fortune. Grab a cup of coffee, settle into your favorite spot, and let's share this story together. Before we begin, drop a comment to let me know where you're watching from. I love seeing how our stories bring people together from all over. Now relax and enjoy. If you'd told me that last Thanksgiving would be the final time I saw my mother alive, I would have slowed down. I wouldn't have rushed dessert. I wouldn't have let a silly argument about stuffing ruin the entire night. But more than anything, I would have listened closer. I teach literature and manage the library at a public high school in Asheville, North Carolina. My life used to be beautifully quiet, until my mom died, and everything she left behind nearly destroyed my marriage. Or maybe it revealed what was always there, hiding beneath the surface. That Thanksgiving started like most do in my family: polite tension, overcooked green beans, and just enough wine to keep everything civil. My husband Jacob and I drove up the winding road to my mother's house in Bent Creek, a cozy little place nestled near the forest line. It was always chilly up there in November, colder than in town. Margaret Rhodes, my mom, insisted on hosting every year, no matter how small the gathering. Tradition matters, she used to say. Jacob walked in carrying the pumpkin pie from Whole Foods like it was some kind of peace offering. "Smells amazing in here, Mrs. Rhodes," he said, flashing his politician smile. "Thanks, Jacob," she replied, not looking up from the turkey. "Emily, can you help me with the gravy?" That was Mom's version of a rescue mission. I followed her into the kitchen, where steam fogged the windows and her cranberry apron was already stained. She handed me a whisk without turning around. "He's still trying too hard," she said under her breath. "Can we not do this today?" I asked. "I'm not trying to start anything." "Well, you're succeeding anyway." She sighed. "Just keep your eyes open, Emily. That's all I'm saying." I stirred the gravy in silence, pretending I didn't know what she meant. At the table, Jacob launched into one of his big idea monologues. This one was about a boutique marketing firm he wanted to start. Personal branding for high-value clients. Whatever that meant. I could feel Mom's eyes on him the entire time. "I've been talking to some guys at my gym," Jacob said, cutting his turkey into perfect slices. "There's definitely interest. I just need a little capital to get it off the ground." My mom didn't say a word. She just set her fork down very slowly and reached for her wine. "So what would the money be used for exactly?" she asked, her tone casual but sharp. Jacob didn't flinch. "Initial startup costs, legal fees, office space, a website. You know, infrastructure." She nodded once. "And how soon would this venture turn a profit?" He smiled. "If we're smart about marketing, 6 months. Tops." I tried to jump in. "Jacob's really done his research, Mom. He's passionate about this." She looked at me then. Not him, me. And her stare said more than any speech could. After dinner, we sat on the couch with coffee while Jacob fiddled with the firewood and tried to make the flames behave. Mom handed me a blanket, then sat down across from me. "You always did love fixer-uppers," she said softly. "Excuse me?" "Jacob," she said, taking a sip of coffee. "You see the potential in things. That's a gift. But sometimes we confuse potential with character." I bristled. "Can't you just be happy for me?" She tilted her head. "I am happy when you're truly happy, sweetheart. I just want to make sure you're seeing the whole picture. Mom, he's not perfect. But he's who I chose." She gave a small smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I know," she said, "but one day you'll thank me for not trusting easily." We left that night a little earlier than usual. The sky had gone dark fast, and the air carried that wet, smoky scent of coming snow. Jacob drove in silence for the first few miles. Finally, he said, I think your mom hates me. I looked out the window. The trees blurred into shadows as we passed. I don't know what to say to that, I murmured. She interrogated me over dinner. You saw that, right? She's protective. Jacob gave a short, bitter laugh. Yeah, like a wolf guarding her territory. I didn't respond, not because I didn't have anything to say, but because deep down, I'd felt it too. Something about the way she watched him, studied him, like she already knew the ending to a story I hadn't even started reading yet. If only I'd realized just how far ahead she'd planned. If you've ever defended someone you loved, only to find out your mom was right the whole time, tell me in the comments. I know I'm not the only one. I didn't know it then, but my mother wasn't just cooking dinner that night. She was drawing battle lines. The call came at 6:14 a.m. It was one of those cold Asheville mornings where the frost paints every window white and silence hangs like a blanket. I was still half asleep, tangled in flannel sheets, when my phone buzzed violently against the nightstand. Hello? My voice cracked as I answered, not even checking the caller ID. This is Dr. Melton from Blue Ridge General, a voice said, too calm to mean anything good. Is this Emily Rhodes? I sat up. The back of my neck went cold. Yes, this is Emily. I'm so sorry to inform you. Your mother, Margaret Rhodes, passed away early this morning. It appears she suffered a cardiac event in her sleep. There was nothing we could do. Just like that. No warning. No hospital vigil. No time to say goodbye. I remember sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the muted TV screen. I don't even know what was playing, maybe the local news or an infomercial. But the only thing I could hear was the sound of my own breathing. Slow, stiff, mechanical. Jacob stirred beside me. Em? What's wrong? I couldn't answer. I just handed him the phone. Let the doctor say the words again. When he hung up, Jacob wrapped his arms around me. I'm so sorry, baby, he whispered, voice low and careful. But I didn't cry. Not then. I felt blank, like my grief hadn't found a place to land yet. The next few days passed in a haze. Funeral homes, paperwork, death certificates, voicemail condolences I couldn't bear to listen to. And strangely, it was Jacob who took the reins. He coordinated with the funeral director. He called the florist. He made a spreadsheet of guest RSVPs for the reception. She would have wanted something elegant but not flashy, he said, tapping notes into his phone. Maybe lilies and white roses? I nodded numbly, grateful and confused. Jacob wasn't usually the planner. He was more the idea guy, always brainstorming, rarely executing. But this time, he stepped in like a man who knew how to manage tragedy. Or maybe, I thought in a darker moment, like someone who had waited for it. The wake was held at Harrell's Chapel the following Saturday. A crisp, overcast day where every breath felt like smoke. People filled the pews in heavy coats, murmuring softly and clutching tissues. I stood at the front beside Mom's framed photo, her favorite picture, the one where she was holding a book and laughing into the wind. I still couldn't cry. I'd tried, but every time I got close, it was like something inside me froze up, like I didn't have permission to fall apart yet. Jacob stood beside me the entire time, offering sips of water and squeezing my hand. He told everyone I was being so strong, but strong didn't feel like the right word. Disconnected felt closer, like I was watching it all from underwater. It wasn't until after the service, during the reception at Mom's house, that the numbness cracked just a little. I was standing in the living room, surrounded by the scent of potluck casseroles and old wood polish, when someone tapped me on the shoulder. It was Denise Hargrove, Mom's longtime friend from her quilting group. She looked older than I remembered, wearing one of those patchwork scarves Mom always used to make. I'm sorry to bring this up today, Denise whispered, glancing around nervously. But she wanted me to give you this, if anything ever happened. She slipped a small folded note into my hand. The paper was worn at the edges like it had been held and rehoused many times. I looked down at it. 2 lines, written in my mother's sharp handwriting. Check the sewing box. Bottom drawer. Do not tell Jacob. My heart thudded once, hard. I looked up, but Denise had already slipped into the kitchen, chatting softly with someone from Mom's book club like nothing had happened. I folded the note and tucked it into my coat pocket, suddenly wide awake. Have you ever lost someone and realized you still had things left unsaid? I wish I'd asked more questions. I wish I'd looked closer. In a house full of casseroles and condolences. My mother had left me one more message, and she didn't want Jacob to know. Grief does something strange to your sense of time. 1 minute you're still standing in the church lobby, accepting lukewarm hugs. The next, it's been 5 days, and you're watching the leaves blow across your mother's empty driveway, wondering how anything can look exactly the same when everything feels completely different. We stayed at Mom's house that week. Jacob said it would be easier to handle the estate, the visitors, the mail. He brought over our suitcase from the apartment and unpacked it into my childhood bedroom like he belonged there. I was too hollow to argue. That Monday morning, I wandered into the kitchen to find him sipping coffee at Mom's old oak table, scrolling on his laptop. Sunlight poured in through the window, catching the dust in midair. You okay? I asked, grabbing a mug and pouring myself a cup. He smiled, too quickly. Yeah, just making a list of everything we might need to take care of. I sat down. Like what? Insurance paperwork, property titles, asset appraisals. He clicked open a tab. Also, you know your mom had some really nice pieces in here. I blinked. Pieces? He gestured toward the dining room. That mahogany table. Solid. The hutch, too. Might be antique. And her jewelry box has a few things that look valuable. I stared at him, unsure how to respond. I'm just saying, he added quickly, you could get a good price if you ever wanted to downsize or sell anything. There it was, that slight shift in tone, the way his voice dipped from concerned husband to opportunist. I looked down at my coffee. I'm not thinking about any of that right now. Of course not, he said smoothly. But later, when you're ready, I'm just trying to help. That afternoon, I sat on the floor of Mom's study, flipping through old photo albums while Jacob sorted through paperwork nearby. He'd made a spreadsheet, color-coded no less, tracking everything from funeral costs to projected real estate value. She was more organized than I expected, he said, opening one of her file drawers. Almost everything's labeled very methodical. I smiled faintly. She always was. She had backup plans for her backup plans. Jacob snorted. Wish more people thought like that. But there was something in his tone, too admiring, too interested. Like he wasn't thinking about my mother. He was thinking about what she left behind. I watched him out of the corner of my eye as he opened another drawer, lingering a little too long over an envelope labeled Safe Deposit Box. He didn't know I'd already opened it, and that everything of value had already been transferred to the lawyer. Still, he noted it on the spreadsheet. Later that night, I went to grab a sweater from my suitcase and noticed his laptop still open on the bed. I wasn't snooping, not intentionally, but the screen hadn't gone to sleep, and a web page was clearly open. It was a listing site for high-end auction houses, Bentleys, Heritage, some smaller ones I didn't recognize. A few tabs were bookmarked. Appraising estate jewelry. How to value antique furniture. Selling inherited items tax-free. My stomach tightened. I closed the lid gently and walked back out into the hallway like nothing had happened. The next morning, while Jacob went to pick up pastries for the last of the visitors, I finally did what the note had asked. Check the sewing box, bottom drawer. Do not tell Jacob. It was still in her craft room, tucked into the corner beneath the window, exactly where it had always been. Mom hadn't sewn much in the last few years, but she'd never gotten rid of it. Sentimental, she'd said once. The bottom drawer was stiff. I had to jiggle it a little to get it open. Inside were old fabric scraps, dull scissors, and a felt-lined glasses case with no glasses in it. I opened the case, a flash drive, black, unmarked, heavy for its size. I stood there for a long moment, turning it over in my palm. The air in the room felt suddenly thick, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. When Jacob returned, I was sitting at the dining table again, the USB tucked safely in the pocket of my hoodie. He kissed the top of my head and placed a croissant beside me. "You okay?" I nodded. "Just thinking." "About what?" "Mom," I said. He smiled, but his eyes flicked toward the hall. "Yeah, me too." But I didn't believe him. Not anymore. Have you ever looked at someone you loved and realized you don't know them at all? That's what it felt like. Like the man I married was a character I'd misread in my own story. That night, I waited until Jacob fell asleep. Then I plugged the USB into my laptop and found a video waiting for me. One file, no label, just waiting. There's a kind of silence that only lives at 2 a.m. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that settles on your chest like a weight. Thick, waiting. I sat at the dining table in the same spot where my mother had passed around her famous pecan pie every Thanksgiving. But now, the only thing in front of me was my laptop and a small, ominous flash drive. I clicked it open. One file. No name. No timestamp. Just a single .mp4 video. My fingers hovered over the mouse. I hesitated, not because I was afraid of what I'd see, but because I already knew it would change everything. I clicked play. The screen lit up with a shaky recording. The video was grainy, clearly taken on her old phone. My mother was sitting in her sewing room, wearing the same burgundy cardigan I'd given her 2 Christmases ago. Her hair was pulled back, her glasses perched low on her nose. But her eyes? They were piercing. Calm, but focused. She looked right into the lens, right into me. "Emily," she began, "if you're seeing this, then he's already circling." I froze. "I know this isn't the moment you expected, and I'm sorry that I'm not there to talk to you face to face, but I need you to hear me out. Completely. No interruptions. No Jacob." Her voice caught slightly, but she pressed on. "I've been watching him, not like a detective, like a mother, with instincts, and I knew something wasn't right the moment he started asking me about your student loans. Then about my car, then about the house, always with a smile, always just curious." I felt my face flush. "He's charming. I get it. So was your father. And you saw where that landed me." She let out a dry laugh. "But I didn't build my life for some slick-talking opportunist to waltz in and drain it." She leaned in closer to the camera. "So here's what I did." I couldn't breathe. "You'll learn soon enough, maybe from Fallon, maybe from the papers themselves, but I changed my will. Not just the beneficiaries, the structure. You inherit everything, but only on one condition." Her voice softened, but her tone stayed firm. "If you are married at the time of my passing, you cannot access the trust until you are legally divorced. No spouse, past or present, may receive, control, or benefit from a single cent of what I leave behind." I blinked. I rewound the last few seconds. Played it again. "Only you, Emily." My chest tightened. "Oh my God," I whispered. Mom's face relaxed slightly. "I know this sounds extreme, maybe even cruel, but it's not about punishing you. It's about protecting you." She paused. "I saw it coming. I knew he'd show his real colors once money entered the picture. I saw it in the way he looked at your ring, not your eyes. I saw it in how he always asked what I had, but never how I felt." My hands started trembling. "I couldn't stop you from marrying him, but I can make damn sure he doesn't rob you blind when I'm gone." She reached toward the camera, and for a second I thought she might cry. But instead, she nodded, resolute. "Be smart, my girl. Be strong. You'll know what to do." The video ended, just like that. No signature, no goodbye, just that lingering stare. I sat there for a long time. The laptop screen went dark, but I didn't move. The house was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the refrigerator and the faint tick of the kitchen clock. I didn't know what I felt. Gratitude? Betrayal? Vindication? All of it. None of it. My mother had gone behind my back, but she'd done it to protect me from the man lying in the next room, who I was beginning to realize might have never truly loved me at all. I rubbed my eyes. My mouth was dry. I got up and reached for a glass of water. That's when I heard it. A soft creak. I turned. Jacob stood in the hallway. He wasn't wearing a shirt, just his pajama pants, and that carefully composed expression he wore whenever he was trying to look harmless. But his eyes were alert, focused. "What are you watching?" he asked. Ever felt the ground shift under you and realized it had been cracking for months? That's what this felt like. I wasn't just grieving anymore. I was waking up. I didn't answer him, because suddenly I knew something he didn't, and I had no idea what he'd do when he found out. The attorney's office smelled like leather and old paper, like nothing had changed in decades. Even the ticking wall clock felt like it belonged to another century. I sat on the edge of a brown leather chair, palms sweaty, knees bouncing slightly. Jacob wasn't with me. I'd told him it was just a quick signature thing, and he'd offered to grab coffee while I handled it. Truth was, I needed to hear this alone. Mr. Fallon, a tall man with graying temples and a quiet way of speaking, shuffled a stack of folders as he looked at me with gentle eyes. "Emily," he said, folding his hands. "First, let me say how sorry I am about your mother. She was one of the sharpest women I've ever worked with." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. She could be a lot, but yeah, sharp is the word. "She trusted you," he added, "more than anyone." Then he pushed the folder across the desk. "This is her final will and trust." I opened it carefully, my eyes landing on the bolded figure first, $732,400. I blinked, looked again. "That can't be right," I whispered. "It is, Mr. Fallon replied. Margaret was disciplined, quiet about her finances, but incredibly strategic. She had retirement savings, 2 small investment properties you likely didn't know about, a modest stock portfolio, and she inherited a portion of her aunt's estate several years back. I shook my head slowly, trying to process it. She always acted like money wasn't a big deal. She didn't want it to be a big deal. She just wanted it to be there when you needed it. I swallowed hard. And the house? Fully paid off. That's included as well. I stared at the numbers, the itemized breakdowns, the signatures. I felt like I was holding something radioactive. "Emily," Mr. Fallon said gently, tapping a paper near the back. "You'll want to pay special attention to this clause." My eyes moved across the paragraph he pointed to, but my mind was already 2 steps ahead. Access to the full trust is contingent upon the beneficiary's marital status. "If you're married, you do not receive access," he said, confirming what I already knew from the video. "Your mother inserted this clause after consulting with multiple estate attorneys. The trust becomes fully available only once you are legally divorced." "And if I stay married?" "The entire amount, every dollar, is automatically redirected to the North Carolina Heart Foundation." I let out a long breath. She really did it. She really built a cage around it. "She built a shield around you," he said quietly. I folded the page and set the folder down in my lap. "Does Jacob know any of this?" "Not unless you told him. She was extremely careful." I stared at the edge of the desk, tracing the grain of the wood with my fingers. a strange mix of emotions surged through me. Gratitude, anger, guilt, and something else that felt like relief. When the meeting ended, Mr. Fallon walked me to the elevator. "You don't need to decide anything today," he said. "But I suggest you read through everything carefully. Take your time, and do not, under any circumstance, share these details with anyone until you're sure what you want." I nodded. "I won't." Then the elevator doors opened, and my stomach dropped. Jacob was standing in the lobby with a to-go tray of coffee in one hand and a bouquet of orange tulips in the other. He spotted me instantly and lit up. "There's my girl," he grinned. "Thought I'd surprise you." The smile didn't quite reach his eyes. As I stepped out, he handed me a coffee and the flowers, then kissed my cheek. "You okay?" he asked. "You look pale." "Just tired," I said. "A lot of paperwork." "Did you find out what she left you?" I paused. "A lot of memories." He laughed like it was a joke. "You're not gonna make me guess, are you?" "I told you, it was mostly formalities today. The lawyer has to do more paperwork." Jacob nodded, but I saw the flicker in his expression, the way his fingers tapped the coffee cup. And he was hunting for information. I kept my grip on the folder tight beneath my coat. "Anyway," he said, slipping an arm around my shoulders, "I thought maybe we could stop by that open house in Weaverville, the one with the 2-car garage." I blinked. "The what?" "The listing I showed you last week. If the estate came through, maybe it's time we think about something bigger, yeah?" I looked up at him. Smiling. Charming. Planning. And I realized in that moment, he wasn't with me. He was circling, just like my mother said. Have you ever had someone smile at you and suddenly realize it wasn't love in their eyes? It was calculation. I nodded and sipped my coffee. But all I could think was, he has no idea what's coming. If this story touches you, drop a number 1 in the comments. Every one reminds us that these stories matter, and it gives us the motivation to keep sharing them with you. Grief is a strange filter. Everything looks the same, but feels just a little off. Our apartment hadn't changed. Same tan throw pillows, same watercolor prints, same chipped mug that said "World's Best Librarian." But it didn't feel like home anymore. Not since I'd learned about the inheritance, and especially not since I learned why my mother had placed a lock on it. Still, Jacob was doing everything he could to be the perfect husband. He made dinner 3 nights in a row, massaged my shoulders without me asking, even offered to take over the laundry, something he hadn't voluntarily touched in 8 years. "You've got enough on your mind," he said one night, placing a glass of wine beside me while I curled up with an old photo album. "Let me take care of things for a while." I wanted to believe it. God, I wanted to believe it. Maybe he was just trying to help. Maybe he really was stepping up now that Mom was gone. But then came the spreadsheets. It started small. Jacob had his laptop open at the kitchen table when I got home from school the following Tuesday. "Hey babe," he said casually. "Check this out." I dropped my keys into the bowl by the door and walked over. On the screen was a detailed breakdown labeled Q1, Q2 Vision Plan, 2024. I raised an eyebrow. "Vision plan?" He grinned. "I've been thinking. This is our moment, Em, a fresh start. New year, new phase of life, and I figured, why not dream big?" I scanned the tabs. Travel budget, car upgrades, housing expansion, LLC startup costs. "You made all this?" I asked, surprised. He nodded, proud. "Took me all weekend, just playing with numbers, you know. But look, if we adjust your salary projections with even a conservative inheritance figure, say $500K liquid, we could pay off your loans, trade in both cars, maybe even invest in that small firm I told you about. They're scaling fast. You'd love the founder." Very ethical guy. I kept my expression neutral, but inside something twisted. You know we can't touch the money yet, I reminded him, gently. He brushed it off. Sure, but we will. So why not plan now? Manifest it. Isn't that what people say? He laughed, light and breezy, but I noticed he quickly closed one tab labeled Asset Unlock Timelines in Marital Estates. That night, he lit candles in the living room, played a Spotify jazz playlist I didn't even know he had saved. We had pasta with homemade sauce and red wine. I know you've been going through a lot, he said, reaching across the table to take my hand. I just want you to know, I'm here. We've built something special, and I want to grow it. Together. He squeezed my fingers. Let's build something new, Em. Just you and me. Maybe a weekend trip to Charleston? Or, I don't know, what if we started fresh somewhere warmer? Somewhere warmer? I echoed. Florida. Maybe even Arizona. I mean, what's keeping us here? I blinked. My job, my students, the house. Sure, he said, backpedaling with a grin. But you've talked about needing a change before, a slower pace. Sunshine. And if we're smart with the money... I pulled my hand back. We don't have the money yet. His smile didn't falter. Not yet. But soon. And when we do, I just want us to enjoy life. Really enjoy it. Haven't we earned that? The way he said we scratched at the edge of my brain like a dull knife. For the next few days, it didn't stop. Jacob sent me links to luxury condos just to look at. He bookmarked cruise packages for next winter, after everything's settled. He brought home brochures from a BMW dealership with a little sticky note. Your dream car? At first, I tried to see it as kindness, a man trying to lift my spirits. But that kindness had an edge, a rhythm, a strategy. And every time I hesitated, every time I said, let's wait, or I'm not ready to make any decisions yet, his tone dipped just slightly into something else, tighter, colder. On Thursday evening, I came home to find the dining table completely cleared and set up like a war room. He had an Excel sheet projected onto the TV, charts on his tablet, and color-coded sticky notes mapping out our financial future. I stood in the doorway, frozen. Jacob, I said, this is too much. He looked over his shoulder and grinned. No such thing as too prepared, babe. But we haven't even... I know, he said, waving his hand. But just look at this one thing. I did some digging and there's this real estate opportunity in the Blue Ridge area, super undervalued right now. And if we moved fast... I said I'm not ready. I snapped louder than I meant to. The room went still. Jacob turned. I'm just trying to help. You're the one who said you wanted stability. A better life. What's wrong with dreaming a little? I didn't answer. I was too busy trying to steady my pulse. After dinner, I escaped to the bedroom, phone in hand. My head was pounding. My heart even worse. That's when it buzzed. New message. Fallon Law Office. Subject. Urgent. Your mother's documents. Please call ASAP. You ever get that feeling in your stomach, like your body knows the truth before your heart is ready to hear it? I stared at the screen, then at the man sitting on the couch, smiling at his spreadsheet. And I knew something wasn't right. Not at all. The next morning, I called Mr. Fallon the moment I parked in front of the school. I hadn't even taken my coat off. Emily, he answered on the first ring, his voice low and urgent. Thank you for getting back to me. I wasn't sure how long you'd be under the same roof. That stopped me cold. He knew. He didn't say it, but he knew. I'm free this afternoon, I said quietly. Can we meet in person? Come by at 4. Don't bring him. By the time I arrived, the sky had turned a moody gray, and the temperature had dropped again, sharp, damp winter air that sank into your bones. Fallon's office was just as I remembered. Dark-paneled, cluttered in a controlled way, and thick with the smell of old books and cold coffee. He ushered me into a side room I hadn't been in before. Smaller, more private. No receptionist. No distractions. "I need you to understand the full extent of what your mother prepared," he said, pulling out a thin red folder and placing it gently between us. "I thought I already did," I said, trying to stay steady. "The trust clause, the divorce trigger, no access if I'm married." He gave a slight nod. "That's just the umbrella." I blinked. "Excuse me?" He flipped open the folder and slid a document across the table. It was a prenuptial agreement, signed, dated, notarized. I felt my breath catch. It had my name on it. "And Jacob's—" "This can't be real," I whispered. "We never signed a prenup. He would have thrown a fit." "You didn't sign it together," Fallon said, folding his hands. "Your mother had this prepared shortly after your wedding. She brought it to me and asked how to legally file it without involving your husband." I stared at the paper. Is that even allowed? In very rare circumstances, yes. Especially if the prenup is not between two parties dividing current assets, but meant to define future conditions around an independent trust. "She filed a prenup after we were already married?" He nodded. "She listed the clause under future inheritance protection. Jacob didn't have to agree, because legally, she wasn't binding him. She was binding you." My stomach turned. "The clause states that if your spouse attempts to challenge, claim, or request access to any portion of your inheritance, either directly or indirectly, he forfeits all rights to any marital assets gained after the date of this filing, including your apartment, your joint savings, and yes, the trust itself." I could hardly speak. "So if he tries to contest, he loses everything?" "Correct. He triggers what your mother called the total exclusion clause. Once triggered, his name is legally barred from any financial access linked to your mother's estate, and anything you've acquired since that filing date." I leaned back in the chair, my heart racing. She really didn't trust him. "She trusted you," he said gently. "But she knew love can make smart women look away." He slid me one more page. A handwritten letter, dated 3 years ago. In her tight cursive, Mom had written, "If he ever forces her hand, let this protect her. If I'm wrong about him, this will never matter. But if I'm right, she'll need more than words to fight back." I didn't realize I was crying until one drop hit the page. "Do I have to use this?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Can I just walk away and keep the peace?" "You can try," Fallon said carefully. "But if he files, if he contests anything, even verbally, that clause becomes your only shield." I left the office with the red folder tucked under my arm and my stomach twisted into a knot. I wanted to believe I wouldn't need it, that maybe Jacob would settle or just go quietly. But deep down, I already knew better. When I got home, I expected him to be working or on his phone. But instead, Jacob was in the living room with a tape measure, measuring the window frames. I froze at the doorway. He didn't notice me at first. He was talking to himself, half muttering. "If we knock this wall out, we could open the floor plan. Maybe add French doors to the patio. Pool would go just past the fence." I stepped into the room. "You're planning renovations?" He turned, startled, but only for a second. Then that salesman smile slid into place. "Just thinking ahead, I mean, this place has great bones. It could be incredible with a little love." He paused. "Once the inheritance clears, we haven't talked about renovations," I cut in. "Well, maybe we should," he said, slipping the tape measure into his back pocket. "You deserve a space that reflects where we're going, not where we've been." I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just nodded, walked past him, and locked the red folder in my bedside drawer. You ever have a moment when your love for someone collides head-on with your instincts? That's where I was, and for the first time, I was listening to my gut. He was remodeling the living room. While I was preparing for war, I used to think marriage was about compromise, about two people building something together, brick by emotional brick. But lately, it felt more like Jacob was standing on the scaffolding while I hauled all the weight, and now he wanted to own the whole building. It started with breakfast. I'd just poured my coffee and was reaching for the almond milk when Jacob opened the fridge again, peering in like he'd lost something. "You know," he said casually, "we should probably start shopping organic, especially now that we can afford it." I didn't respond. He closed the door with his foot and leaned on the counter, watching me. "We should really upgrade the fridge, too. It's been making that noise since last winter." I stirred my coffee. "It still works." "Yeah, but it's tired. Like a lot of stuff in here. Honestly, the whole apartment feels temporary now." He let those words hang in the air, like bait. I kept my voice calm. "I don't want to make any big decisions yet." He blinked. "Why not?" "Because my mother just died. Because we haven't even read through all the legal paperwork." "Because I'm still processing, Jacob." He scoffed. "It's been 3 weeks." I turned slowly to look at him. "And?" His mouth tightened, but he smiled anyway. Tight, artificial. "I'm just saying, Em, we're married. We make decisions together. That's how this works." I walked past him, mug in hand. "Right, of course." That afternoon, I was organizing lesson plans on the couch while Jacob scrolled through listings on his phone, loudly, intentionally. He'd switched from real estate to luxury timepieces to small business grants in less than 10 minutes. "Hey," he said suddenly, holding up his phone. "You ever think about opening a bookstore?" I glanced at him. "What?" "A little indie place, maybe a cafe inside. Your dream, right?" That was a college dream. He leaned toward me. "Well, it doesn't have to stay a dream. We could invest in something like that. Hire a team, let you manage the vibe, curate books." "It could actually be fun." "I'm not looking to start a business," I said carefully. "You're not even curious?" "I'm tired, Jacob." He sat back, disappointed. "You used to have vision." I stared at him, heart pounding. "Used to." After dinner, another meal he barely touched, he stood at the sink with a glass of wine and said, without turning around, "You know, your mom always was kind of a controlling witch." I froze. "What did you just say?" He shrugged, still not looking at me. "I mean, come on. She practically interrogated me every time we visited. Never smiled unless I kept my mouth shut. Treated me like some stray dog you picked up off the street." I stepped forward. She was protective and smart, and she saw through things I didn't. He finally turned to face me, wine swirling in his glass. "Oh, please, Emily. Don't rewrite history just because she left you a fat check and a pile of guilt." My cheeks burned. "That money isn't even—" He cut me off. "It's ours. Whether you like it or not." That word, ours. He said it like a claim, not a partnership. "We're married," he added. "What's yours is mine. Isn't that how it works?" I stared at him, stunned. "No, Jacob. Not when it was protected. Not when she made sure it stayed separate." He rolled his eyes. "You actually think that'll hold up in court?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" "I've been doing research," he said, smug now. "North Carolina's a marital property state. Doesn't matter what your mom thought she was doing. If it's acquired during marriage, we split it." He took another sip. 50-50, sweetheart." I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed with my back to him, staring at the closet door, my brain pinging between disbelief and fury. This wasn't about a fridge or a bookstore or even my mother anymore. This was about control, entitlement, and me finally realizing that the man I married was more interested in my inheritance than in me. The next morning, while he showered, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and typed something I never thought I'd need to Google: how to record conversations legally in North Carolina. I learned it's a one-party consent state. That meant if I was part of the conversation, I could legally record it without informing the other person. My hand hovered over the trackpad. I felt sick, like something inside me had quietly cracked and would never go back to the way it was. You ever reach a moment where the person you love becomes someone you have to protect yourself from? That's where I was. And I had to stop pretending it would fix itself. I closed the laptop slowly, then opened my desk drawer and pulled out the old recorder I used during parent-teacher conferences, just in case. By the time Sunday rolled around, I felt like I was sleepwalking through someone else's life. Jacob was on his best behavior again. He made pancakes, suggested a walk through the arboretum, even offered to vacuum. But I couldn't stop watching him. Not the way a wife watches her husband with affection. The way you watch something dangerous when it's pretending to be harmless. I'd started keeping a notebook in my work tote. Nothing fancy, just dates, quotes, changes in behavior, a log of his suggestions, and the purchases he'd floated casually. Golf clubs, backyard renovations, real estate seminars. I hadn't decided what I'd do with it, but I knew I needed it. That afternoon, when Jacob left for the gym, I picked up the phone and called someone I hadn't spoken to in months. My cousin Tasha. Tasha and I grew up more like sisters than cousins, until life pulled us to opposite corners of the country. She was now a paralegal in Phoenix, working under a family law attorney and raising 2 kids with her husband Marcus. She answered on the second ring. "Emily?" Her voice instantly perked up. "Wow, hey, you okay?" I hesitated. "Can I ask you something personal?" Tasha paused, then dropped her voice. "You're scaring me a little. What's going on?" I closed my eyes. "Jacob, it's complicated." "Oh boy, say less. What did he do?" "Nothing illegal, yet. But he's been circling the inheritance like a hawk, making plans, pushing me. And I found out something about my mom's will. He doesn't know yet, but I think he will soon." Tasha exhaled. "Okay, so what are you thinking?" "I'm trying to figure out if this is sudden, or if it's something he's been planning." There was a long silence. Then she said something that turned my stomach cold. "You know, Marcus mentioned something a couple years ago. I didn't think anything of it at the time." "What was it?" "Jacob called him out of the blue, like 2 summers ago, and pitched this weird silent investor idea, said he wanted a low-key partner for a digital marketing business. It didn't sound legit, so Marcus never followed up." My fingers tightened around the phone. "Wait, he called Marcus?" "Yeah, out of nowhere. Said he was looking for funding, promised high returns and all that. Marcus thought it was just some desperate idea he was chasing." "Why didn't you tell me?" "I honestly didn't think it mattered. You and Jacob always looked solid from a distance." I pressed my fingers to my temple. "And this was 2 years ago?" "Yeah, why?" I laughed, but it came out flat, bitter. "Because that's around the time he first brought up the idea of asking my mom for help with a loan. He said it was for my student debt. Now I'm wondering if that was just his cover." Tasha's voice softened. "Emily, I don't want to jump to conclusions, but from what you're saying, this doesn't sound new." "It's not just the money," I whispered. "It's the way he's treating me, like I'm an obstacle to get around, not a partner." There was a pause. Then, if he's planning something, like contesting the will or making a claim, you need to stay ahead of it." "I'm trying. I mean legally." "I know." After we hung up, I sat in the silence of the apartment, staring at the framed photo on the mantel. Jacob and me on our 5th anniversary in Charleston, arms around each other, pretending nothing could ever crack the surface. I thought back to all those little red flags I'd ignored over the years. The way he always picked the most expensive bottle of wine when someone else was paying. The way he turned cold when I said no. The way he changed the subject every time I brought up boundaries. Now it all felt like a pattern, not an accident. Jacob came home an hour later, flushed from the gym, a smoothie in hand. "Hey, babe," he said breezily. "You look tired." I forced a smile. "Didn't sleep great." "You should rest. You've been doing too much thinking." That line, too much thinking. I nodded. "Maybe I'll take a nap." He kissed my forehead and headed into the bedroom to shower. As soon as the water turned on, I walked down the hallway and opened his sock drawer. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I just needed to know. At first, all I saw was socks, boxers, and a few crumpled receipts. But near the back, tucked under a folded t-shirt, I saw it. A slim black phone. Not his usual. Smaller. No case. I pulled it out, heart hammering. It buzzed in my hand. A text popped up. "We're still on for Friday?" No name. Just a number. Have you ever found something that made your blood run cold, but also made everything finally make sense? I stood in the doorway, holding the burner phone like it was a bomb. Because suddenly, I knew. Jacob wasn't just thinking about the money. He was planning around me. The rain started around dusk. Not the light, soothing kind, but that heavy, steady downpour that drums against the roof and makes the whole world feel like it's holding its breath. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the burner phone lying on the counter like it might sprout legs and walk away. I hadn't told him I'd found it. Not yet. I was waiting, watching. Jacob came home just after 8. Umbrella in one hand, grocery bag in the other, whistling some song I didn't recognize. He walked in like nothing was wrong, like I hadn't spent the last hour reading through texts that confirmed what I already suspected. He'd been making moves, quietly, strategically, and not just about money, about me. "Got your favorite," he said, holding up a bottle of Cabernet. "And that cheese you like from the co-op." I didn't answer. I just nodded and started unloading the dishwasher, the clink of glass and silverware louder than usual. Jacob glanced over. "Everything okay?" I wiped my hands on a towel. "You tell me." He blinked, then smiled. "Okay. That sounds like the start of a conversation I wasn't prepped for." I turned to face him fully. "Who's 480555291's and seen?" The smile faltered. Not completely, but enough to catch it. "Sorry?" he said, playing dumb. "The number that just texted your other phone," I said evenly. "The one I found in your sock drawer." His eyes narrowed, then went wide, feigning surprise. "You went through my things?" "Don't deflect," he chuckled, low, like a warning. "Wow. Okay, so we're snooping now?" "You have a second phone, Jacob. That's not snooping. That's self-defense." He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You're blowing this way out of proportion. It's just a backup line I use for work stuff." "Oh, really?" I raised my eyebrows. "Because from what I saw, it looks more like the line you use to set up meetings without me knowing. Financial meetings. Legal ones." "You don't know what you're talking about," he snapped, too quickly. "I saw the texts." He stepped closer. "So now you're spying on me?" "No," I said quietly. "I'm protecting myself. From you." The silence between us stretched for a beat too long. The only sound was the rain hammering the windows and the low hum of the fridge. Then Jacob exhaled, loud, annoyed. "You know what your problem is? You think everyone's out to get you. First your mom, now me." "My mom was out to get you," I said coldly. "And for good reason." He shook his head. "Unbelievable. I've been nothing but supportive since she died." "You've been circling since the will was read." Jacob's voice dropped. "We're married, Emily. Her money, your money, that's our future." "No, it's mine. She made that very clear." He stepped back, something in his expression hardening. "You're not thinking straight." "I'm thinking clearer than I have in years." Another silence. this one heavier. Finally, he said, "I'm gonna sleep in the guest room tonight." "You obviously need space." He grabbed his phone, the real one, and walked out of the kitchen. No apology, no attempt to explain, just retreat. And in that moment, something shifted in me. I wasn't sad. I wasn't scared. I was done pretending he didn't know exactly what he was doing. I spent the rest of the night at the dining table, my laptop open, a blank flash drive plugged in. First, I downloaded every text between us for the past year. Every financial spreadsheet he'd sent, every PDF, pitch deck, or LLC idea he'd tried to rope me into. Then I went back through my voicemails. His tone had changed sharply right after the funeral. The shift was there, buried in words. After that, I opened my notes app and began copying over the entries from my notebook, the dates, the statements, the manipulations, the paper trail. I backed everything up. Twice. By 2:00 a.m., I had a folder labeled "In Case" saved on 2 devices and hidden under a layer of dummy documents. Just in case. And as the rain softened to a mist against the windows, I finally let myself cry. Not for him, but for the version of myself who had believed him, who had defended him to my mother, who had once mistaken charm for loyalty. You ever start gathering evidence against someone who swore they loved you? Not because you're paranoid, but because you finally believe your gut? He was sleeping 10 feet away behind a hollow door. But I was no longer in the same marriage. And now, I had proof. It was storming again the next morning. Fitting. Jacob had already left when I got up, his gym bag missing, his protein shake cup rinsed and drying beside the sink. No note, no text. I'd barely slept, but my mind was crystal clear. Something had shifted in me permanently, like a lock finally clicking into place. I poured a cup of coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at his tablet charging on the counter. He never used it for anything important, or so he claimed. But I knew Jacob better now. I knew how carefully he hid things in plain sight. I opened it. No password, just a fingerprint reader. And, as luck would have it, he'd used it before leaving, still unlocked. The first thing I noticed was the cloud storage icon blinking with a red dot. A new upload. Recent. I tapped it. Inside was a folder labeled Personal, Do Not Delete. Classic. I opened it. The first document was an email thread between Jacob and a lawyer named Michael Rowe from a firm in Raleigh. The subject line hit me like a slap. Potential divorce timeline, financial leverage strategy. The emails dated back nearly 5 weeks, 2 weeks before my mother died. I froze, reading the words again. Divorce, financial leverage. Before Mom's heart ever stopped. He'd been planning this. I scrolled. There were messages discussing best case outcomes for spousal asset claims, and whether post-marital trust clauses could be disputed. Rowe had responded professionally, warning Jacob that contesting a trust set up prior to death with a condition-based clause will be difficult, especially if there's legal precedent. But Jacob kept pushing. She's grieving. I just need to stall until it unlocks, or find a way to get her to move funds voluntarily. I felt like I was going to throw up. Then came the PDF. Prenup Challenge Draft. Rhodes v. Rhodes. My name. A mock complaint. He was preparing to challenge the prenup Mom had secretly filed after our wedding, the one protecting her estate from exactly this kind of scheme. And then the real gut punch. Inheritance claim proposal. Draft for mediation. A spreadsheet. A pitch deck. He had prepared a presentation for how to divide up shared future earnings tied to my mother's estate, projected profits, proposed buy-ins, like I was a business deal, not a wife, not a person, just an investment vehicle. I slammed the tablet down on the table, shaking. My hands were trembling too hard to type at first. But eventually, I forced myself to breathe. I grabbed my laptop, opened a secure folder, and started dragging files from the cloud onto a USB. Every document, every email, every spreadsheet. I labeled the folder simply, Truth. Then I opened my inbox and composed a new message to Mr. Fallon. Subject: Urgent. You need to see this. Fallon, please review the attached files. Everything is timestamped and backs up what we discussed. I'm ready to move forward. Emily, I hit send. Then I sat back in my chair. The storm still pounding outside, my whole body buzzing with rage. This wasn't just betrayal. This was strategy. Premeditated, cold, greedy, and he thought I wouldn't notice. He thought I'd be too sad, too slow, too trusting. He didn't know who I'd become, and he definitely underestimated my mother. An hour later, Mr. Fallon replied, Received. I've reviewed everything. This changes the game. I'll start drafting protective filings immediately. Do not alert him. Let me handle the legal notice. And Emily, well done. I stared at those words for a long time, not because I needed validation, but because they meant something more. I wasn't just a grieving daughter anymore. I wasn't just a manipulated wife. I was in control now. I reached for the USB, slid it into a clean envelope, and tucked it into the bottom of my purse next to my notebook. Then I whispered, quietly, like my mother might still hear me through the walls. Checkmate. Have you ever found proof so damning, so undeniable, that it made your whole body go still? That was today. That was my moment. I wasn't hoping anymore. I wasn't guessing. I had evidence. And now, I had a plan. I was shelving new arrivals in the school library when the front office called me over the intercom. Ms. Rhodes, you have a delivery at the front desk. I figured it was another box of donated paperbacks or maybe a PTA gift basket. My hands still smelled like binding glue when I walked to the front office and saw a man in a beige windbreaker standing there. Middle-aged, polite smile, holding a large envelope. He didn't introduce himself. He just asked, Are you Emily Rhodes? I nodded. Yes? He handed me the envelope. You've been served. Just like that. Not even a pause. The sound of the front door clicking shut behind him was louder than it should have been. I took the envelope to the teacher's lounge and opened it alone. Inside were the official divorce papers, filed by Jacob Rhodes. Grounds, irreconcilable differences. Requested division, 50-50 split of all marital assets. My heart didn't drop. It didn't shatter. It just stopped for a second, then kept beating, quieter, slower. There was no mention of my mother's estate, no direct claim anyway. But it was there between the lines, the apartment, the savings, the phrase anticipated financial changes relevant to shared lifestyle was tucked into the property section like a snake coiled in legal jargon. He thought this would catch me off guard. He thought he was still ahead. I sat with the envelope in my lap for 15 minutes, not crying, not panicking, just sitting, like a soldier learning the war had begun. When I stood up, I felt different, like I had armor on. That night, Jacob didn't even mention it. He came home late, humming a tune I didn't recognize, tossed his jacket over the back of a chair, and asked if I wanted Thai or pizza for dinner. I stared at him for a moment, wondering how he could be so casual. But that was his talent, wasn't it? Wearing ease like cologne? I said, "Pizza's fine." Then I excused myself to grade papers. He smiled. "You're quiet today. I've had a long day." He nodded and reached for the TV remote like we were just another couple trying to agree on dinner. That night, I added new entries to my notebook. Date received, Tuesday, 10:42 a.m. Method, served at work. Claims, 50-50 split. No warning, no discussion, no decency. Then I printed the spreadsheet of all the documents I'd backed up from his cloud and cross-referenced them with quotes from his recent conversations. Every offhand comment, every financial pitch, every dinner where he'd said, "When the money comes through," this wasn't a man reacting. This was a man executing a plan. The next morning, I placed a small digital recorder into the zipper pouch of my purse. I'd used it for years during parent-teacher conferences, helpful for following up with students and keeping track of details. Now it had a different job. North Carolina was a one-party consent state. If I was part of the conversation, it was legal. And I was done playing fair with someone who filed for divorce behind my back and came home asking what I wanted on my pizza. 2 nights later, I got my first real moment of clarity. We were sitting at the kitchen table. I had my laptop open, working on lesson plans. He was flipping through a glossy real estate brochure. "Lake Norman's not as expensive as I thought," Jacob said, pointing at a 2-story house with a dock. "I mean, if you liquidated half the trust after the paperwork clears." I looked up. "You already filed. Why are you still talking like we're a team?" He froze. "What?" I shut the laptop slowly. "I said you already filed, so stop pretending." He recovered with a shrug. "I didn't want it to be hostile, Emily. I figured we'd both come to the table like adults." "You didn't give me the chance." He looked away, jaw clenched. "Well, I didn't think you'd be reasonable." I leaned in. "You're not getting a cent of my mother's money." His laugh was small and sharp. "You really think that clause will hold up in court?" I smiled, not because I was confident, but because he wasn't, not anymore. That night, when he finally went to bed, I replayed the conversation from my recorder, his tone, his implication, his arrogance, all captured, all time-stamped. I emailed the file to a secure folder and titled it, Asset Conversation, Confirmed Intent. Then I poured myself a glass of wine and wrote in my notebook, "He drew first blood. But I'm not bleeding. I'm documenting." You ever reach a moment when you realize the person who once kissed you goodnight is now trying to gut you by daylight? I had that moment, and I didn't flinch. He filed first, but I'll be the one who finishes this, on my terms. Jacob set the table, cloth napkins, candles, my favorite garlic bread from that little place in Montford. He even took the lasagna out of the oven like it was a Michelin-starred reveal. "You've been working so hard," he said, pouring me a glass of wine. "Thought we could have one of our old quiet nights." I stared at the plate. He'd cut the edges of the bread perfectly, just the way I used to do for him. "Thank you," I said, managing a smile. My purse, recorder zipped inside, sat just a few feet away on the sideboard. The red light blinked silently from beneath the leather. He was charming tonight. Relaxed, casual, like the past few weeks of manipulation hadn't happened, like he hadn't blindsided me with divorce papers or tried to trick me into unlocking a fortune. We ate in silence for a bit. The air was too still, like the house was holding its breath. "I've been thinking," he said finally, wiping his mouth with a napkin. "Maybe we got off track." I raised my eyebrows. "Got off track?" He nodded. "Yeah, I mean, grief does weird things to people. And stress. And lawyers. But maybe we could hit reset. Try again." My fingers tightened around the stem of my glass. "Is that what you want?" His smile widened. "It's what I want, if it's what you want." He reached for my hand. I let him. But inside, I was screaming. He poured me another glass. Poured himself one too. Then leaned back in his chair, getting a little too comfortable, a little too confident. "You know," he said, swirling his wine, "if you'd just played along, just a little, we'd both be rich by now." My heart paused. "What do you mean?" He shrugged. "I mean, the way your mom set this thing up. Yeah, it's a legal mess. But if we'd been united, if you'd let me handle it, I could have worked something out. Negotiated, shifted assets, got creative. And instead," he chuckled, "instead you're fighting me like I'm the enemy." I set down my fork. "Aren't you?" He looked up, startled, then covered it with another grin. "Come on, Em. It's business." Not personal. That's funny, I said quietly, because it's felt very personal to me. That line, if you just played along, kept repeating in my head like a looped voicemail. I kept my expression calm, like nothing had landed, but inside, I felt something shift. Not fear, not fury, control. Later that night, after the dishes were done and Jacob retreated to his home office, I slipped into the bedroom and opened my purse. The recorder had captured the entire conversation, crisp, clean, damning. I transferred the file to my computer, labeled it Dinner Confession, and emailed it to Mr. Fallon with a short note. This is what he really thinks. Timestamped, let me know next steps. 10 minutes later, Fallon replied, "This changes everything." I sat back in my chair, staring at those 3 words. This wasn't just about protecting my inheritance anymore. This was war. And now, I had ammo. You ever watch someone lie to your face with a smile so polished it could be sold in a store? That was Jacob. But tonight, his charm cracked. And I caught every word. He thought dinner was reconciliation. But I came for receipts, and now, I had them. The courthouse smelled like old carpet and coffee that had been sitting too long. My palms were damp as I sat outside the mediation room, clutching a folder thick with emails, timelines, and legal printouts. Everything Margaret prepared. Everything I had gathered. Jacob walked in 5 minutes late, wearing his favorite gray blazer and that insufferably smug expression that had become his mask for months. He glanced at me, nodded once like we were still on the same team. We weren't. Our attorneys were already in the room, mine, Mr. Fallon, calm and cool as ever, and his, some slick-talking man with gelled hair and a Bluetooth earpiece he refused to take out. We took our seats across from each other. No one smiled. The mediator, a woman in her late 50s with a sharp tone and no patience for dramatics, opened the meeting. Let's keep this civil. You are here to resolve division of marital assets, alimony, and any claims related to the estate of Margaret Rhodes. Jacob's lawyer jumped in first. My client believes he is entitled to an equitable share of all assets accumulated during the marriage, including the marital home, any shared retirement accounts, and half of Mrs. Rhodes's estate, which he was led to believe would benefit them both. He said it without flinching. Led to believe. My breath caught in my throat, but Mr. Fallon didn't miss a beat. With respect, he said, sliding a document across the table, Margaret Rhodes structured her estate in a very specific way. This includes a trust with protective clauses and a prenuptial agreement signed post-marriage but properly filed. My client Emily is the sole beneficiary, Mr. Rhodes was not entitled to any portion, and if he attempts to access the estate, as he has already done, he invokes the exclusion clause. Jacob's lawyer scoffed. That clause will never hold up. It's retaliatory. Mr. Fallon leaned forward, calm. And yet, it's airtight. The mediator raised an eyebrow. Do you have supporting documentation? I nodded and reached into my folder. One by one, I laid the pieces on the table. A timeline showing Jacob's escalating behavior after my mother's passing. Emails between Jacob and a divorce attorney, dated weeks before her death. Screenshots of messages planning inheritance strategies. And finally, the audio. Fallon passed over a flash drive. This is a recording of Mr. Rhodes saying, and I quote, "If you'd just played along, we'd both be rich by now." It was recorded legally by my client in her own home. Jacob's face drained. He opened his mouth to argue, but the mediator lifted a hand. Let me hear the recording before you speak. We waited while she plugged it in. The room went still. I could hear my own voice on the playback, then his. If you just played along. The silence after that felt louder than the words. I wasn't manipulating her, Jacob said quickly. We were talking through things. She took it out of context. The mediator turned to him, unimpressed. Context doesn't change intent. Then to me. Do you wish to pursue full separation of assets? I nodded. Yes. She paused, scribbled something in her notes. We'll need a second mediation round to verify the legality of the prenuptial and estate clauses. Until then, all marital financial transfers are frozen. Neither party is to access shared accounts. Do you understand? Jacob leaned back, jaw clenched. Fine, he muttered. But this isn't over. We stood to leave, and I gathered my papers slowly, letting it all sink in. The fight wasn't finished. But for the first time, the tide was turning. I walked past him without looking back. He called after me, but I didn't stop. Ever been in a room where the truth finally speaks louder than the lies? I sat across from the man who once held my hand and promised forever, and realized he never planned to keep it. He planned a heist, but I came armed with the truth. The judge didn't make a ruling that day, but Jacob stormed out like he'd already lost. And deep down, there's a special kind of silence that comes the moment a manipulator loses control. It was a Thursday morning when the ripple started. I was brewing coffee in my kitchen, my little ritual now that Jacob had moved out, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Tasha. Just saw this online. Did you tip off the firm? Attached was a screenshot from LinkedIn, Jacob Rhodes, status, on administrative leave. My heart stuttered. I hadn't said a word. But apparently, the truth travels fast once you let it breathe. Later that morning, Mr. Fallon confirmed it. Someone from his investment group, those slick friends Jacob once bragged about, had anonymously submitted the court transcript and mediation audio to Jacob's employer. Looks like karma brought backup, Fallon had said dryly. It didn't take long for the rest to unravel. According to The Buzz, Jacob had been misusing corporate travel funds for client dinners that didn't exist, likely trying to wine and dine his silent partners in the real estate scheme he once tried to rope my cousin's husband into. The moment they started pulling threads, everything frayed. By Friday, he'd been officially placed on leave, pending an internal investigation. By Monday, his investment circle had kicked him out of their private Slack group. I saw the message forwarded from Tasha, who was still quietly watching from the sidelines. We can't risk our names being dragged through whatever this is. Rhodes is out. No one stood by him. Not one. I wish I could say I felt triumphant, but truthfully, it just felt still, like something heavy had finally been lowered to the ground. I stood in the backyard that afternoon, watching the magnolia tree I planted for my mother. The petals had started to curl slightly, winter brushing close. She would have liked seeing this, not out of spite, but because it meant I was finally safe. That night, I opened my email and saw the subject line I'd been waiting for. Trust Access Confirmation, Emily Rhodes. I blinked, my eyes welling before I even read the body. It was official. The court had reviewed all evidence and upheld every clause Margaret had put in place. The inheritance was legally mine, protected by the trust. Jacob had no claim, no loophole, no back door. He had filed first, but I had finished it. I sank into the couch, clutching the letter. This wasn't just money. It was freedom inked into law. It was every boundary I had ever been too afraid to draw, finally sketched in permanent black and white. I texted Fallon a simple, "Thank you, for everything." He replied a few minutes later, "She did most of the work. You just had to believe her. And yourself." I'd once imagined a life where Jacob and I used that money to travel, build something together, maybe finally put down roots somewhere outside the pressure of our pasts. But that life had been an illusion, built on charm, propped up by control, dismantled by truth. If you've ever felt someone using love as leverage, if you've ever sat across from a smiling face and wondered what game they were playing, you're not crazy, you're catching on. And once you start asking questions, their whole empire of lies starts to fall. Jacob called that night. I didn't pick up. Instead, I took a deep breath, walked over to the file cabinet Margaret had once kept her records in, and pulled out a manila envelope I'd never opened. Inside, a note in her handwriting. Trust is earned, not inherited. But I built this to protect you, not punish him. If you're reading this, it means you saw what I never had the chance to say. I love you, and I believe in your future. I pressed the note to my chest and whispered, "Me too, Mom. Me too." As the wind picked up outside, I stared at the trust letter one more time. It wasn't just approval, it was proof. Proof that love could be fierce and quiet, and that justice didn't always come loud. Sometimes it arrived like this. In the stillness after the fall, it had been 2 weeks since the trust letter arrived. 2 weeks of still mornings and quiet evenings. No more lawyers, no more blindsided calls, no more Jacob. Just me, and the house that no longer felt like it belonged to him in any way. I stood barefoot in Margaret's garden, now in full bloom. The camellias had burst open, soft and pink like something out of a watercolor. She used to say the earth remembered who loved it. And as I crouched near the edge of the magnolia, it felt like she was here, not as a ghost, but as a presence. There, nestled in a small, rusted tin beneath the base of the tree, I found the envelope. It was hand-labeled, in her old cursive, "For Emily, when the dust has settled." I sat on the porch swing before I opened it. My hands trembled a little, even though I didn't know why. Maybe I thought I'd already found all the surprises she had in store. But grief has a way of folding you inward, then springing open just when you think you've gotten through the worst of it. Inside was a single page. Her handwriting was shakier now, from the final few months, no doubt. I know I wasn't always the mother you needed, but I never stopped watching, loving, or worrying about you, especially once I realized Jacob wasn't who he pretended to be. I'm sorry I didn't say more when I had the chance, but you were always strong. I didn't want to take away your fight, only make sure you had something to fall back on when the fighting was done. You didn't fail. You saw clearly. And now, you're free. Don't be afraid to start over. Just promise me you'll never leave your own future unprotected. I read it twice. Then again. Tears streamed down, not out of pain, but out of the kind of love that finally feels understood. All those years I thought she didn't approve of me. Maybe she was just trying to protect me the only way she knew how. And when she couldn't reach me in life, she reached forward into my future. Later that afternoon, I pulled out my laptop and opened a fresh document. Last Will and Testament of Emily Margaret Rhodes. I stared at the screen for a moment, then typed the first sentence. It wasn't about the money, or even the house. It was about control, taking ownership over my story, the way Mom had done for hers. I added a clause about a scholarship fund in Margaret's name, for rural library science students in Western North Carolina. I added language that protected the mobile library I was building, stating it could never be used for commercial investment or sale. And I added a simple note in the margin. This legacy is not to be fought over. It is to be lived into. Writing it felt right, like I was no longer the woman being cornered. I was the woman at the table, drawing lines with clarity and peace. I closed the laptop and returned to the garden with a mug of coffee. The light hit the magnolia just right, casting long shadows across the grass. I imagined her sitting beside me, that tight-lipped smirk of hers when she was amused but didn't want to show it. I used to mistake that for judgment. Now I think it was her version of holding back tears. I get it now, I whispered. You weren't just protecting the money. You were protecting me. The breeze picked up, soft and warm. You saw everything I couldn't. If you've ever had someone love you in a way that felt harsh, but later made sense. If you've ever found yourself grateful for a boundary you didn't understand at the time, leave a comment. Sometimes the things that save us aren't loud. They're folded in quiet decisions, sealed in envelopes, hidden in the roots of a garden. I don't know what lies ahead, but I know this. I'm not waiting to be rescued again. And I'm not walking into anything without my eyes open and my name protected. That's what Margaret left me. Not just a house, not just a fortune. She left me the tools to rewrite my story, on my terms. And this time, no one's taking that from me. I thought I'd cry when I handed over the keys. I didn't. Not even a lump in my throat. It surprised me. Because for all the pain this house had witnessed, the whispered arguments, the silences louder than screams, it had also held parts of me that felt too fragile to lose. But that morning, under a Carolina blue sky, I felt only peace. The moving truck pulled away before lunch. I stood in the empty driveway with one last donation box in my arms. Inside were Jacob's books, a few dress shirts he'd left behind, and, oddly enough, a bottle of expensive cologne I'd once gifted him that he never wore. I placed it in the donation bin outside the church thrift store with no ceremony, no second thoughts. Let someone else make new memories out of those things. My phone buzzed. The email subject line made my heart flutter. Approved. Mobile Library Vehicle Registration. Read Rise Foundation. I'd gone back and forth on the name for days, but every time I looked at Margaret's photo, the one of her in front of her tiny childhood schoolhouse, I kept hearing her voice. Reading saved me, and you can't rise unless you're fed. So I named it for her, and for every kid in the mountains who couldn't get to a library. I drove straight to the title office. The check had already cleared from the house sale, and I was ready to sign the final paperwork for the van. It wasn't just any van. It was custom retrofitted with fold-out bookshelves, pop-up seating, and even a tiny storytime rug. I'd put in every detail myself, from the paint color, deep forest green, to the gold-lettered logo on the back door. Read Rise, Stories for Every Mountain. It felt more like me than anything I'd ever owned. The title clerk was a balding man in his late 50s, with kind eyes and a tie he'd clearly worn too many times. As I handed him my ID and paperwork, he paused. Rhodes? He said, eyes narrowing slightly. Any relation to Margaret Rhodes? I blinked. Yes, she was my mother. He smiled and leaned back in his chair. She helped me once, years ago. I was behind on rent and scared to lose my apartment. I don't know how she found out, but one day she left a white envelope with the exact amount at my office. No note, just mercy. I didn't know what to say. All these months, I'd been digging through her will, her secrets, her warnings. But that moment reminded me, she wasn't just protective. She was generous. Quietly, strategically generous. She never mentioned it, I finally said. He shrugged. That was her way. But she'd be proud of you. Starting something new. Making something bigger. He slid the keys and final documents across the desk. This is the right ending for that house, and the right beginning for you. Outside, I sat in the driver's seat of the van for the first time. The leather smelled new. The sun poured through the skylight above the front rows of bookshelves. There was a small plaque on the dashboard I hadn't noticed before, a gift from the Upfit team. For Margaret, whose stories never stopped. I gripped the wheel and exhaled. Not from fear, from arrival. That night, I stayed in a little cabin outside town, not quite ready to move into the new apartment yet. I needed one night of clean air and no expectations. I made tea, pulled a worn book off the van shelf, and curled into a blanket on the porch. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel watched, or doubted, or strategized against. I just felt safe. Free. If you've ever walked away from a home not because it wasn't beautiful, but because you weren't safe there, drop a comment. If you've ever turned your grief into something that served others, tell us how. Stories aren't just written on pages. They're lived, rebuilt, and carried forward, like books on wheels, rolling through mountains that once seemed impossible to climb. Tomorrow, I'd take the van on its first route, a school in Waynesville, then a pop-up reading circle at the community center. But tonight, I whispered into the air, "Goodbye, Asheville. You gave me enough pain to break, and enough love to rebuild." And I meant it. I never thought I'd step foot in Florence. But there I was, standing on a stone bridge over the Arno River, warm sun on my shoulders, the wind scented with espresso and centuries of history. My mother always said she'd go one day. She kept a guidebook by her bed, dog-eared and worn. She never made it, so I came for her, but I stayed for me. The first morning, I wandered without a plan. No itinerary, no one to please. Just me, the streets, and a freedom I hadn't tasted in years. I ducked into cafes and sat with little cups of espresso for hours. I people-watched. I listened to the musical rhythm of a language I didn't understand, but somehow felt comforted by. At one point, I passed an open-air market and bought a hand-stitched linen bookmark with a magnolia stitched on it. I didn't even haggle. It just felt right. I kept thinking about how long I'd spent living in fear of disruption, afraid to upset Jacob, afraid to disappoint Margaret, afraid of making the wrong move or no move at all. But now, I felt weightless, like I was finally walking through a life that fit me, not one I was forcing myself to fit into. One afternoon, I passed a little tattoo shop tucked between a bakery and an antique bookstore. The front window had an old typewriter, a chessboard, and a sign that said, "Memories Made Permanent." I stood there for a full minute, and then I walked in. The artist's name was Luca. He was quiet, kind-eyed, and didn't ask many questions. I showed him a rough sketch I'd drawn on the flight over, a chess queen under a magnolia branch. Simple, symbolic. He looked at it, then at me. "First tattoo?" he asked. I nodded. "For your mother?" I smiled, surprised. "How'd you know?" He just tapped his chest gently and said, "You carry it here." The tattoo was small, behind my left shoulder, where only I would feel it unless I chose to show someone. As the needle buzzed, I didn't flinch. The pain was sharp, but purposeful, like pruning a flower so it could grow stronger. When it was done, I looked in the mirror. The queen stood tall. The magnolia curled around her like armor. It was perfect. That night, I found a rooftop restaurant overlooking the Duomo. I ordered a glass of wine and opened Margaret's Florence guidebook, which I'd packed out of instinct more than sentiment. Inside, I found something I hadn't noticed before. A tiny handwritten note slipped between pages. "If I never get here, go for me. And while you're at it, make your own map. M." I folded it up and held it in my lap the whole dinner. The stars came out one by one. I let the wine warm my chest and the air carry me. I wasn't grieving anymore. I was becoming. Back at the hotel, my phone buzzed. A message from Jacob. "Jacob, I miss you. Just thought you should know?" I stared at it for a beat too long. Not because I missed him, but because I didn't. Not even a flicker of doubt. No ache, no curiosity, just a quiet certainty. That chapter was closed. I didn't reply. I didn't even open the message. I hit delete. And then I turned off my phone. I woke up the next morning at peace. I spent the day at the Uffizi, got lost in a maze of side streets, and had a conversation with a bookstore owner who didn't speak English, yet still somehow understood exactly what I was saying. Because sometimes you don't need to translate joy. You just need to live it. If you've ever walked away from someone who only loved the idea of you, but not the real you, drop a number 1 in the comments. If you've ever started over and found more of yourself on the other side, tell us how. Freedom doesn't always look like fireworks. Sometimes it's a quiet rooftop in Florence, a new ink mark under your skin, and the strength to say, "That's enough. Tomorrow I'll fly home." But I wasn't returning to the same life. I was returning to the one I'd finally claimed. For me, for Mom, for every story still waiting to be written. I never thought I'd drive something the size of a UPS truck. But here I was, backing into a school parking lot with bright decals that read, "Read Rise, the Mobile Library Project." The engine sputtered quiet, and I threw it into park. Behind me, the shelves swayed with donated books and brand new hardcovers I'd ordered myself. Every spine had been hand-selected, every bin labeled by genre and reading level. Behind the driver's seat, right above the rearview mirror, hung a 4x6 photo of Margaret, one of the few I had where she was laughing, her hand caught mid-gesture, a book in her lap. She didn't get to ride in this van, but she helped build it, every inch. It was library day at Pine Hollow Elementary, a Title I school tucked into the valley. Budget cuts had gutted their reading program years ago. But today, they had me. They had us. "All right, y'all, one at a time," I called, sliding the side door open as a wave of second graders surged forward like a stampede of sneakers and shouts. They clambered inside, wide-eyed. "Whoa," one boy whispered. "This looks like a bookstore on wheels." "Better," I said, grinning. "It's your bookstore on wheels." We read Charlotte's Web under a pop-up tent. The breeze tugged at the corners of my blanket, and I pressed the book down with a rock. The kids sat cross-legged, leaning in. "Why'd Charlotte help Wilbur?" one girl asked, her pigtails lopsided and her tone skeptical. I closed the book for a moment, looking out over the field. "Because she saw something in him," I said softly. Even when he didn't. After story time, we handed out stamped bookmarks and let the kids pick one free book each. Some of them clutched their choices like treasure. One boy, probably no older than 8, ran back as he was leaving and whispered, "My dad says libraries don't make money, but I think this one makes people better." My throat tightened. I bent down. "You're absolutely right." He nodded like he'd just solved the biggest riddle of his life, then darted off toward the bus line. As I began shelving returned books, I noticed someone waiting off to the side. Not a parent, not a teacher. A woman with a press badge clipped to her blouse, camera bag slung over one shoulder. She smiled. "Emily Rhodes?" I straightened. "That's me." "Julia Meyer, Blue Ridge Living. I've been following your story since the grant announcement came through. Hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," I said cautiously. "How can I help you?" She pulled out a small notebook. "I'd love to feature you and the mobile library in our next issue. It's not every day a local woman turns personal heartbreak into a statewide literacy initiative." I laughed gently. "That's one way to describe it." She grinned. "There's one thing I've been wondering, though." I raised a brow. She flipped her notebook shut and tilted her head. "Do you mind?" she asked. "If I call the article The Savage Will?" The name hit me like a shiver and a hug at once. Margaret had been many things. Complicated, strong, sharp-edged, but savage. That made me smile. Because she'd played the long game, protected me before I knew I needed protecting. And in the end, she left behind not just wealth, but a blueprint. A will that wasn't just about assets, but about freedom. I looked at Julia and nodded slowly. "That's exactly what you should call it." Have you ever had someone protect you after they were gone? Drop a number 1 in the comments if someone left you wisdom that finally made sense in hindsight. Or just share this with someone who needs reminding. Sometimes the best revenge is rebuilding something beautiful. As Julia packed up and left, I glanced one more time at the photo of Margaret. The truck was quiet now. The kids gone. The road ahead wide open. I sat down in the driver's seat, rested my hand on the worn leather steering wheel, and whispered, "Still writing the story, Mom. Just like you wanted." And then I turned the key. It was one of those soft Appalachian evenings where the sky blushed lavender before slipping into blue. I sat on the porch steps, a mug of black coffee in hand, steam rising into the cool air. The magnolia tree we planted, the one for Mom, had already started to bloom. Funny how time folds over itself. One minute you're crying over betrayal, the next you're watching your life root itself again, leaf by leaf. I looked out at the neighborhood, quiet and golden. No courtrooms, no lawyers, no lies lingering in the hallway or pretenses hanging between coffee mugs, just silence, but the kind that feels earned, not empty. Inside, the mobile library schedule was pinned to the fridge. I had 3 school stops next week, a grant application due, and a call from a women's foundation in D.C., asking if I'd consider speaking at their summit. They wanted me to tell my story. But the truth is, I don't think the story was ever just mine. Not entirely, because it started before I even realized I was a player in it. Mom saw it unfolding long before I did. She didn't just leave me an inheritance. She left me a strategy, a safeguard, a lifeline disguised as legalese. It wasn't emotional revenge. It was calculated protection, a mother's foresight sharpened by her own regrets. And that kind of love is fierce, unapologetic, savage in the way it doesn't ask permission to be right. I pulled a small notebook into my lap, one I'd started keeping just for me, not for the courts or attorneys or timelines, just me. Tonight's page read, "Dear future me, don't ignore your gut again. Don't apologize for protecting your peace. And never, ever underestimate how far love will go to shield you, even from the ones who claim to love you most. You're smarter now, stronger, and you've already won harder battles than whatever's next. Keep choosing your voice over your silence, and keep the door open only for the people who knock with kindness. You've got this, trust me." I let the pen rest across the page and smiled. This kind of peace didn't come wrapped in comfort. It came from clawing my way through betrayal, through manipulation, through grief and guilt, and still standing, no longer just someone's daughter, or someone's wife, or someone's easy target. I was someone with her own endgame now. Jacob. Last I heard, he'd taken a job 2 states over, something far beneath what he used to brag about at dinner parties. He still tried to text sometimes, the usual lines, just checking in. "I still think about us. Do you ever miss what we had?" I didn't block him. I didn't need to. Every message was a quiet reminder that I made the right choice, and that silence, sometimes, is louder than any answer. The sun dipped below the trees, and I wrapped the cardigan tighter around my shoulders. Margaret had been right. About him, about me. She hadn't lived to see the final move, but she planned it anyway, not for herself, for me. Justice, in the end, didn't come from the courtroom. It came from the clarity of knowing I chose to rebuild instead of burn, to learn instead of collapsing, to walk away without bitterness, but with boundaries so strong they'd never be crossed again. I stood up, coffee now cold in my hand. The porch light flickered on behind me. Before heading inside, I turned one last time to look at the magnolia. It was blooming. And for the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving, I was living. He thought he was playing the game, but Mom was playing for me, and she won. And if you believe that silence can be a woman's sharpest weapon, share this story. Because sometimes the smartest revenge, don't let them break you.